Hi everyone, I'm Ali, I'm an architect, and today we're going to do a quick intro to the RIBA. So let's go. Okay, so this is a video to go with another video about the ARB because a lot of people get confused between the RIBA and the ARB and the difference and what they do. Today we're going to talk about the RIBA, which is the Royal Institute for British Architects. But there are other similar bodies in the countries of the United Kingdom. So there's the RIAS, which is the Royal Institute of Architects in Scotland, of which I am also a chartered member, so of both the RIBA and the RIAS. Then there's also the RSAW, which is the Royal Society of Architects in Wales, and the RSUA, which is the Royal Society of Ulster Architects for Northern Ireland. So all of these bodies are kind of affiliated or have allegiance with the RIBA. And they kind of do the same role, essentially. Okay, so if you've seen the video on the ARB, then you'll know that I very much repeated the fact that the point of the ARB is that it was set up by an Act of Parliament and that it's to protect the public from people practicing as architects who might not be qualified to be an architect, essentially. So that's what that does, and that's kind of the official body that does that. And then the RIBA is different. So the RIBA and all of the other the other countries of the UK's sort of similar bodies are all optional. So they're all kind of a voluntary choice to be a member of those. And you can be a member as a student, you can be a member as like an associate level of the RIBA, and you can be a chartered member. So chartered membership is when you are qualified as an architect. And I'm a chartered member of the RIBA. And the company I work for is also an RIBA chartered practice, and those are slightly different things as well. These organisations, the RIBA, the RIAS, the RSAW, the RSUA, all of those, exist to deal with the profession, and they exist for architects. So they're an organisation, almost like a kind of club for architects to further the profession, and they're on the side of architects in that. But they also want to educate the public and present architects well to the public to have them understand what an architect's role is and why they should hire one or use their services, those kind of things. But the crucial difference is the ARB exists to protect the public, and the RIBA and the others kind of exist to look after the profession and further the profession. Each of these organisations is voluntary, but if you choose to join them, they all also have their own codes of conduct. So largely their codes of conduct are kind of similar to the ARB's code of conduct, kind of back to back with that, but they can be slightly more stringent or slightly more detailed of what they require from their members. And that's why being an actual chartered member of any of these organisations is seen as kind of a gold standard in architecture. So to be a practicing architect, you only need to be registered with the ARB, and then you can choose to be also a member of any of these organisations. And that's seen as you kind of stepping up a level almost. And I'll link below to the RIBA and its code of conduct as well, which you also will get tested on at part 3 usually. And the codes of conduct between these organisations are quite similar. So you need to sort of check with all of them if you're doing more than one. So the first time I did my part 3, it was in Scotland. So I was still tested on the RIBA's code of conduct, but also aware of the RIAS. And I chose to be a chartered member of the RIAS because I got educated in Scotland and I'd love to live in Scotland again. So for me, it made sense to choose to have both of those. Okay, so one of the things that the RIBA requires of its members, that the ARB code of conduct doesn't specifically require, and we did talk about this a little bit in the ARB video, is that all the members are expected to complete CPD. So that is continuing professional development, and that's to make sure that you're maintaining skills or competency or acquiring new skills as the construction industry changes, to make sure that you're kind of always current and as competent as possible within the profession. And what the RIBA require of you is 35 hours per year of CPD, and that's a higher requirement than the CPD for accountants or lawyers, for example, in the UK. RIBA chartered practices also have specific requirements. So as I mentioned earlier, I'm chartered as an architect, but the practice I work in is chartered as a practice. So that doesn't necessarily mean that everyone in that practice has to be chartered as an architect. but it then means that there's rules upon that practice itself, like the actual running of that business. These are things such as employment policies or quality management that the RIBA asks of chartered practices to do. Chartered practices are also required to have all their employees undertake CPD as well. So even if not all their employees are like personally chartered with the RIBA, then all their employees have to undertake CPD. Okay, so the RIBA provides CPD for its members. You usually do have to pay for it, but they run lectures, for example, in-house, and also accredit CPD from other providers. You need to use the RIBA's website to kind of manage all of that process. And if you want to know more about CPD, that's probably a whole topic in itself. Unlike the ARB, that, as we've said, is more about maintaining the protection of the public, the RIBA provide quite a lot of resources for architects. So one that pretty much every architect will know is, because obviously you're recording PDR through the RIBA's website, they have the RIBA plan of work, which just has a general trajectory of a construction project. They also have contracts and agreements, so appointments with your clients, and they also do construction contracts, mainly for domestic jobs and quite sort of simple jobs, but they provide their own contracts like that and provide advice to their members. And they also publish things like the job book that most people who are studying to be an architect will be aware of. So this is where the kind of confusion can often come, because the RIBA provide a hell of a lot of kind of resources to architects and kind of checks on what they're doing to kind of make life simpler as an architect. And obviously, when you're going to university, the courses are RIBA accredited. So they're kind of ensuring that those courses will be ARB compliant, but the RIBA is a completely voluntary kind of organisation to get involved with, even though you'll be well aware of things like that. For example, the plan of work, even if you're not a member, it doesn't matter. They're just kind of like in all of architecture, if that makes sense. Then they ensure there's kind of a whole suite of information for architects and generally guidance. So also they do the book like Practice Management and Law and Practice. They're really good Part 3 books. They also publish things like the Part 3 handbook, which is pretty much a must if you're undertaking your Part 3. So the RIBA provides all of these things essentially, obviously, for everybody, but also it's kind of from their membership that they provide these things that are kind of trying to enhance people's understanding of the profession. So again, you see quite clearly that the RIBA is about helping its members, looking after the profession and kind of trying to further the profession and get it all on a sort of equal footing, which is what the plan of work essentially is trying to do, really. So that's a quick intro to the RIBA and how it's different from the ARB, and also a very quick mention, obviously, of its allegiances with the RIAS and the RSAW and the RSUA. And they're all independent bodies in their own right, affiliated with the RIBA. So you can check out all of them individually. I'll drop a link to their websites in the description as well. But that's it for today, guys. A really quick intro. I hope it was helpful. We'll probably touch on these topics more as we talk about Part 3 and things, because these two organisations come up and you need to know, for example, the RIBA's Code of Conduct and also the ARB Code of Conduct very specifically, obviously, those 12 points. So check out those videos if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Have a great day wherever you are, guys. Bye. No, okay, start again.